Good evening, everyone. I'm Thomas Moore, Assistant Superintendent for Facilities Planning and Construction here at Dublin Unified School District. Welcome to our Facilities Master Plan Community Town Hall. I would like to introduce our Town Hall leaders, LPA architects. Jim Kissel will introduce his team and then we'll get started without delay. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Thomas. Welcome everybody to our first town hall meeting as part of this facilities master plan update process. My name is Jim Kissel. I'm a principal and director of the K-12 practice for LPA. Also with me tonight is Walter Este, the managing director from our education studio in San Jose. Maria Madrigal as the project manager for the master plan, and Andrea Pippin as an educational facilities planner here in San Jose. We're very glad to have you all here this evening. There'll be lots of opportunities for input and lots of opportunities for questions here during this presentation. On the next slide, Maria. So our agenda for this evening is we've just covered the introductions. We'll be going through the purpose of the meeting. We'll be talking about the facilities project implementation process and a schedule overview. We'll be talking about the challenges that the district's facing and what we've found out and what information we have gathered to date. We'll have an open forum discussion at the end that is really just an open floor for any questions that the audience may have and the community may have in terms of the participants. And then we'll talk about next steps and our future town hall meetings number 2 and number 3. If we can go to the next slide, Maria. So we're using a GoToMeeting webinar format here. So everybody is muted while we are doing the presentation components, but there you can submit a question at any time through the question panel. Submit your question. We'll be actually responding to those questions throughout the process, as well as having opportunities to for you to raise your hand. If you click on the raise your hand icon and raise your hand during those specific discussion points when you see that discussion slide, and we'll be unmuting folks to ask the question of both the panelist here and the district to input during the process. Also, we will be sending out messages during the chat that people can see in terms of instructions here during the process. But please ask any of the questions that you may have regarding the information that is presented at the discussion points, and then any general questions, we'll have that as the open forum at the last part of the meeting, which we're actually saving half of this hour-and-a-half time frame for, just that open discussion for people here on from the community. If we can go to the next slide. So now I will turn it over to Maria to do our first poll questions.
Yeah, so thanks, Jim. At this point, we'd like to ask 4 questions to all the attendees, and we're really trying to get to know who you are and what schools you represent. So the first question is just asking, what best describes you? Are you a parent, teacher, school staff, district staff, a community member, or other? So you should be able to see the poll on your screen right now. I know sometimes if you actually exit full screen, if you're having issues with seeing the poll, it will show up. So we'll pause for about a minute to get some answers to this initial poll question. Looks like we're getting some good responses. We're almost there.
Yeah, 96% of you all have voted. Fantastic.
Alrighty, so now we'll move on to question 2. And I just want to preface, because of the platform, we're only able to put 5 choices on each question. So the next question will ask you what elementary school you're representing. So just know that the first question is elementary school starting from the letter A through F, and then we'll have another question for the additional schools. We're almost there. We're at about 87% responses.
I think we've leveled off here.
Yeah, well, yeah, we can go ahead and close the poll, Erin. And then the part 2 of this question, the middle schools, starting with the letter F through Z.
Okay, I think we've leveled off again.
Alrighty, thank you everyone for your participation. There is one last poll question, similar question to the elementary schools, but for the middle school, and there's only one question. Alrighty, thank you all for your participation. So in terms of the purpose of this meeting, really the main goal is to really listen to the community and listen to your questions and your feedback. But we really want to kick off this master plan update process with you, the community. We want to make sure we familiarize you with the master planning process and the outcomes and really discuss your community goals. So like I said, our job here is to listen. So please use the questions panel to ask questions throughout. And like Jim said, we will be pausing after every module for questions related to what we presented or any questions that have come up thus far. So the first module we'll be reviewing is just review the facilities project implementation process and the schedule overview. So the schedule for this facilities master plan update is really split up into various tasks that can be summarized into 3 phases. And I'm gonna try to use a laser pointer here. So the first third of the schedule is really gathering of information, and that's the phase that we're currently in. We're sort of straddling the gathering of the information and the second phase, which is really synthesizing the information in kind of this middle bit here. And with that synthesis of information, providing options for the master plan and provide all the information to the board. The last third of this process is really reviewing the options that we've come up with and finalizing the documents with the board approval happening September 21st, 2021, actually. Throughout this whole process, there will be stakeholder engagement. We have had board one-on-one meetings and a couple of board updates, and the board updates, as you can see in the schedule, will happen monthly. In terms of community meetings, this is obviously the first community meeting, which you can see kind of this red line here is where we currently stand in the process. So we will be having 2 additional resource committees split up into the remainder of the schedule. And actually, Jim will talk a little bit about what those meetings entail at the end of this presentation. We also have a resource committee that has been established for this process, and we've already met with them twice, and we will meet with them 2 more times throughout this process. Now, diving a little deeper into the components of that data gathering, these circles that you see are data points that are communicated to stakeholders. So we have the demographic review. So reviewing the demographics and making sure we're aligning the long-term enrollment peaks with the school site capacity. We've also met with Ed Services to review the educational vision and goals for the district. We have performed site walks for all the campuses to familiarize ourselves with those campuses. And we'll also be doing some financial analysis of current and potential funding for the projects. And like I said, we have met with the board one-on-one and provided updates. So that's an additional data point that gets gathered and presented to the community through the stakeholder engagement that I mentioned previously. From there, that information is gathered with board input and synthesized into cost estimates and prioritization. And then from there, again, with board input, it will get approved in September. And the deliverable at the end are the master plan diagrams and the implementation plan, which really is a roadmap for growth for the district in the future. The ultimate goal of this master plan process is two-part. There is a short-term goal, which is the implementation plan, and a comprehensive long-term vision. In terms of the short-term goal, we really want to explore big picture ideas and look at district-wide solutions. We want to think outside the box in order to develop innovative development solutions and, again, generate various options for using the funding that the district currently has. We want to maximize that available revenue to complete projects based on the highest needs, and then provide that master implementation schedule. In terms of long-term goals, we want to discover the impact of the educational programs to facilities, so those meetings with Ed Services, and then also identify any future facility needs and any future funding that would be needed to complete the projects. So Walter, I will turn it over to you. If there's any questions in the question panel or any hands up.
Yeah, there are no questions in the question panel, but I don't see anybody hands up right now. But if you do have a question, you'd like to ask it, you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you. If you have any questions about the process or the schedule or sort of what we covered to this point, we'd certainly be happy to answer them. Okay, I got someone here. You are self-muted right now, so if you could unmute yourself, you would be able to speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, there you go.
Awesome, thank you. So I was just going through the slide that was just shared. I mean, not the slide, sorry, the screen where it says community input. And I saw that you had 4 things mentioned there: district leadership, and then school site, and then community input is what I guess you guys are doing right now. But I just wanted to ask, what did you, like, which school sites have you reached out to? Because I'm part of the school site council at Fallon, and I did not get any email asking for input. So I was just curious about that. And when you mean district leaders, whom have you reached out to? If you can just share that information, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for the question. Yeah, we've actually toured each of the school sites in the district and met with the principals and some of their staff to discuss the kind of the current needs at each of their sites and some of the things that they're looking for to accomplish out of this bond issue, or out of the master plan rather. And we've also met with a number of district administrators. We've met with the Educational Services Department, of course, Facilities and M&O Department. As Maria mentioned, we've also had discussions one-on-one with each of the board members. So we've covered a pretty good swath of both the administration and then of each at each school site.
And I would say today at the end of this meeting is a chance for just broad questions to any site or thoughts regarding improvements to the various campuses. We have not made any specific proposals for the improvement of the campuses, and those will be coming later in the process and going to the school sites for their review. So at that point, I would imagine the principals would be talking to the site council and other folks later in the process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Looks like there are no questions. No one has raised their hands at this point. Any other questions out there that you'd like to discuss? You can type it into the question or chat if you'd like.
Okay, maybe we can move on, Maria, and we'll have another question point come up here in a few minutes.
Absolutely. So Walter, I'll hand over the initial next module to you.
Sure. So next we just want to talk about it are the current challenges and excuse me, current challenges and our findings to date. So for the challenges, as you all know, that you have a growing district, unlike a lot of the districts we've come across in the Bay Area of recent. So that indicates you've got a lot of facility needs and a lot of projects to address those needs that the district has defined. Of course, those projects, there's a number of cost overruns that have exceeded the initial planned budget for those projects. The current funding is not available to meet all those needs. And of course, I think most importantly, your demographics in the district are evolving. You know, as I said, the districts are growing and there's certain areas that are growing more than other areas. So you've got some overutilization and some underutilization of different sites. So those are the challenges. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is we're trying to align the projects with the available budget that the district has on hand. And so that's really our task here for this master plan. Next slide.
And I will quickly just go over some of the evolution of those demographics. So demographics report has been updated, which shows there's, like Walter said, under and overutilization of schools as it currently stands with the current boundaries. So this will likely result in revised district boundaries. So at this point, we don't want to focus on individual schools, like for example, Cottonwood increasing in enrollment. We really want to focus in terms of elementary, middle school, and high school as a whole. So in this next slide, you can see kind of easily through these arrows how the enrollment will be projected for the next 5 to 6 years. So for elementary school, the current enrollment is about 6,200 students. And in 2026, 2027, it's expected to increase by about 200 students. Middle school and high school are increasing by larger numbers. Middle school, we have about, or the district has about 23 or 2,700 students, and it is increasing to about 3,400 students. So a little less than 700 student increase. For the high school, right now, Dublin High School is about 3,300 in current enrollment, and it is expected to increase to about 4,160, so a little less than 1,000 students. So next, we want to compare the current and future enrollment with the school capacity. So this next slide, the base of this is the same as the slide I just showed you, but just comparing the capacity. So in terms of current enrollment, and all these numbers are including portables currently on campus. So right now, as it stands, the capacity for elementary school is about 6,800 compared to the 6,200 enrollment. Middle school is about 3,000. And then high school is about 3,900. Now moving to 26, 27, you see that the elementary school enrollment will be about 6,400, and the district will have a capacity for elementary school of about 7,000. And this includes the Murray and Frederickson projects that are currently in the works. In terms of middle school, the capacity including about 900 a student build out for Dublin crossings, which is still up in the air. That's not a decision that has been made, but just for comparison purposes, would be at about 3,600, and this also includes the removal of the middle school portables. And then lastly, for high school, once you take into account the 2,500 Emerald capacity, the district will be at about 5,600 student capacity versus the 4,160 enrollment. And like Walter mentioned, there has been some cost overruns on some current projects that were allocated funds through the 2019 implementation plan. In particular, Emerald High School Phase 1 is about 93 million over budget, and Phase 2 ranges from either 0 to 26 million over budget, depending on the option that the board selects that has been presented to the board, which totals about 93 to 119 million over budget. Murray also has 3 options that have been presented to the board, and it's still pending board selection. And these options range from a 5.6 million surplus on the budget, which means there'll be money left over, to 14.7 over budget. Frederickson Elementary School, just recently, a couple board meetings ago, the board did augment the budget by 4.7 million. And then Dublin Elementary, Dublin's a little different because it's still in the scope definition stages. So it's not a project that's already in the works like Emerald, Murray, and Frederickson are. But in terms of the scope definition exercise, currently it's about 23 to 36.9 million over budget. And again, the board has been presented options for selection for these overages. Oh.
So once again, we have a discussion item here, so feel free to ask a question in the question box, or if you'd like to chat with us, you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you. We do have one question about the demographics. What are the school capacities without portables? I don't know if we have that information quickly available.
And I was going to say, Walter, I'm actually typing the response right now, is we are currently working on that. There are numbers within the demographics report that was presented to the board at the last board meeting, but we are in the process of reconfirming those numbers to look at the capacity of the campuses without the portables. And we also want to look at that, for example, say Amador, the enrichment spaces have been taken over. Spaces for science and art and other enrichment programs have been taken over as general classrooms to house growth. And so we want to look at what is the capacity of that site when the enrichment programs actually function as enrichment program spaces. So we'll be sharing that in our meeting number 2 for the next town hall forum.
We have another comment and question. It's helpful to see the overall cost overruns on a single slide. Could we please understand the top 2 or 3 reasons for overruns for each project?
And maybe you want to go back to that slide, Maria?
Yeah, maybe Thomas or Frida would want to respond to that.
Yeah, this is Thomas Moore, assistant superintendent. Well, the cost overruns are from a variety of different reasons. Some of it has to do with with escalation. So some of these projects, when they were originally estimated, escalation factors were never added to the budgets. So if you're, 2 years late on a project, that could be an extra 6 or an extra 10 to 12% on costs with the escalation that we're seeing right now year over year. Some of them were simply prices just have gone up faster than we could keep up with estimating. You know, you design these projects, you go out to bid. Lately, we've had projects that were substantially, the bids were substantially higher than what our estimates were. So we've gone back to the drawing board to try to resolve some of these estimates. Right now, these numbers are fairly accurate. We've been going over them quite thoroughly, sometimes with more than one estimating company, taking a look at the same project, and then we reconcile those estimates. So the projects you see right here are pretty accurate. In some cases, I think these projects were, the entire costs were not reflected in some of the estimates. So in other words, a lot of times I think people confused construction costs with project costs. So a construction cost number gets floated around and that kind of becomes the number. But in reality, the projects cost anywhere from 30 to 35% more than the construction cost. So we've tried to go back and look at all of the projects. Some of them we have not estimated completely so far. We're just running on preliminary numbers, but we also have, if you look at previous board meetings, there are other projects which we anticipate costing more than was originally anticipated. That includes the middle school, Doherty, and a few other projects we feel will come in higher than what the numbers that are being floated right now. And we're in the process of refining all that through the master planning process to come up with more accurate numbers going forward.
Thanks, Thomas. I have a question here. I'll unmute you, Ramya. You have to unmute yourself and you can ask your question.
Sorry, I typed my question also. So anyway, I'll just ask it now. I just became aware that you know, a lot of classrooms are going to be empty at Valley High because Valley High is moving to Dublin High School, and we also have a vacant property at Nielsen. So I was just curious if your team is going to consider these things in the overall planning.
Yes, to answer your question, yes, we are considering both those things. So we understand that Valley has moved. So we'll be looking at how we can work with that site and then also at Nielsen as well.
Thank you.
All right, we have a few questions.
Yeah, Walter, I was going to say we have a question here regarding the overall cost overruns. Can we see the original budget numbers? Actually, we'll be providing those in the next meeting when we actually have all the data from all the projects. They can be found in, I believe, the last board meeting or the board meeting before that. There were presentations given to the board that included all the background costs for the projects.
There's another question here about the capacity numbers. I'm not sure if you answered that, Jim, but the question is, are the capacity numbers for grades 6 through 12, assuming classrooms will have students every period, or do these numbers take into account teacher prep periods? If we are at capacity, does that mean during a teacher's prep period, another class will be going on in the classroom?
Correct. The capacity analysis takes in the optimal organization and use of the campus per the educational program. So at the elementary sites, we wouldn't be loading the enrichment spaces since those should be spaces that are free for the campus for those programs. And also at the secondary schools, the 6th through 12 grades, we would not be loading the classrooms for the prep period since it is an optimal use of the facility to have the teachers have availability to their classrooms during the prep period.
Here's another question, I believe, for you, Thomas. Why isn't design build being considered?
We actually are considering design build, and I am planning to bring a resolution to the board in August or September to approve a design build as a construction method going forward.
Thanks, Thomas. Here's another question. Has construction stopped on Emerald High School project? What is the current status with respect to the timeline given the shortfall? Thomas, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, construction has not stopped at Emerald High School. Right now, we are toward the end of increment 1. Phase 1 at the high school was divided into 3 increments. Increment 1 is underway. That's mostly underground work and utility infrastructure. Increments 2 and 3 should be starting construction this fall. That's a little later than we would like to have started. We would like to have started late this summer, but it'll be early fall that we start on increments 2 and 3 of phase 1. I don't have a accurate completion date for you yet. That's something that we'll be negotiating with our winning contractors.
Thank you. Another question here, maybe for Thomas or Jim, but probably Thomas. What changes are being made in the budgeting process to make sure that our estimates are more accurate?
You know, the district has had various estimates at various times, and some of them are more accurate than others. I've been going back and looking at estimates from the past, and some of them are quite accurate. Looking over a period of maybe 3 or 4 years ago, some of the estimates from the 2016 master plan are fairly accurate, especially when you account for escalation over the last 5 years. But right now, what we're doing is we're defining the projects and the programs better by square footage of various types. So a new project will be defined by how many square feet of classroom space, how many square feet of administrative space, how many square feet of like NPR or gym. In other words, we're defining the projects more closely with square footage, and then we're applying whatever our best numbers are for square footages for each one of those categories. Then we're adding our program costs, which typically run between 30 and 35%, and then also any offsite improvements or at per acreage cost for developing the grounds. So going forward, I feel like our numbers are going to be pretty accurate. We also have been doing multiple estimates. So right now on Emerald High School and on Murray Elementary, we used 2 different estimating companies, and we took those estimates and we reconciled them. We went through a reconciliation process in order to come up with a number that both companies could agree to. And we're hoping that will prove to be more accurate over the long term.
Thank you.
And Walter, there's a question about special education. I think I answered one of the questions about special ed. This one is a little bit longer, but refers to the fact that special education classrooms are seeming to move around a little bit. And this year, some of the special education rooms are actually in rooms without toilets and other appropriate amenities. One of the intents of this master plan, and I think if you go back a slide there, Maria, to the demographics, is that the intent of the master plan is that the district has capacity at the end of the program to house the students appropriately. That being said, with the growth that is occurring in the district, it is sometimes occurring in areas where you don't have facilities capacity and where you may have excess facility capacity in other areas that could accommodate those students. It's not in the right area where the growth is actually occurring. So we're examining all of those issues as part of the master plan. That's part of the scenarios that we'll be running for the board. The intent at the end of all of that is that we have capacity in the areas where it represents the need from the community, which should hopefully then alleviate the need for moving special ed rooms around all the time because you need those classrooms for students to house growth. So That would be the intent of the master plan, to address that in the future by making sure there's enough capacity in the district. And as you can see over there on the right, just with the project the districts currently has planned, that there would be enough capacity within the district to house the students that are projected. So I know that's a long-winded answer to a question, but it's partly growing pains right now, for lack of a better answer.
Looks like we've got two more questions here. First one, please clarify what the pending option for Murray that may provide a cost surplus. So I believe we identified one option for Murray that was a 5.6 million, maybe on the previous.
On the next slide.
On the next slide, yes. And I don't know if Thomas or Frida, if you could.
I'll take this. Currently in front of the board, we presented 4 options at Murray Elementary, all the way from stopping construction at the end of phase 1, which would basically be classrooms only and would not include a new library administration or NPR. That would be the option that would have the largest surplus. And then there were 3 other options which also provided, or one other option that provided a surplus. That was with building a library building only and pushing the NPR and administration building to a future project. The other one, which was not quite, which needed a budget augmentation, would include a new NPR and administration building, but require moving the library into an existing building. So the board has 4 options available. If you, at this next board meeting coming up, all 4 of those options will be reviewed again, and we're going to ask the board to make a decision on one of those 4 options, so we can move forward with that Murray Elementary.
Thanks, Thomas. Another question here. Someone mentioned that this is a bond issue. Is a new bond your proposed solution to cover the shortfall? If not, what is the proposed solution to cover the difference between available funds and necessary funds to complete the existing projects? Jim, do you want to answer that?
Yep. Yeah, currently a bond. Thomas, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a variety of sources that could come from income. Only one of them is a future bond. We also have Prop 51 or state bond money that will come in. We're just not sure how much and when it will be here. But the state legislature is working to help provide school districts with funds, and that will help us. There's also developer fees. So we actually have 3 sources of income in the future. State bond, which is like Prop 51, state bond money. We have developer fees, and then there is the possibility of a future general obligation bond.
And then there's one last question that came in. The cost overruns for phase 1 of Emerald cannot be explained by escalation alone. What is the primary driver of the overrun with that project for phase 1?
Well, I'd say that the project was underestimated from the beginning, is what I would say was the main driving factor. So the original numbers that were presented on that bond program were not high enough. If you go back through a lot of the literature and presentations and board presentations, you'll find that there was some confusion between construction costs and project costs, and that is a considerable amount, which would explain a good portion of that budget overrun. But there is the board has retained a firm to do a forensic audit, and they are looking into all these issues, and there should be an official answer to a lot of these questions that's in the works right now. But the short short version of it is that, you know, there was not enough money appropriated to this project from the beginning. And, you know, there's you know, all we can do now is take the design and the ed specs, the things that the board asked for, the things that the community asked for, and provide an accurate budget as possible moving forward. So, you know, I mean, I can't explain everything that's happened in the past, but you know, we're trying to make a fresh start on all this. I've been in this position since December, and we're looking really hard at all the projects and trying to get realistic scopes and budgets prepared for all these projects and a plan to move forward to complete them. So we're working really hard at that.
Thanks, Thomas. We don't have any more questions, no more raised hands at this point.
All right,
Yeah.
we can go ahead, Jim.
I would say go ahead. Let's go on with the next part of the presentation.
Yeah, so the next part is really the open forum discussion. So we have reserved half of this meeting to just get the community's questions, comments, feedbacks, and concerns about this process. So we just want to open it up to any questions. They don't have to be related to what we presented specifically, but this is the time for the community's input to really be heard.
And I was going to say, in terms of the questions, Maria, we are recording the meeting just to let everybody know. So that helps us in terms of our making sure that we've got all the questions from the community and that they were heard, and that if we aren't answering them here today, that we can make sure that they're answered during the process.
Okay, we've got one new question here. If the state opens Prop 51 type funding next year, which projects would you plan to use those funds for?
In terms of you're talking the Prop 51, assuming you're talking about the state bond funding, those funds are being put into the pot with all the funds that we know that the district will have. Now, as Thomas referred to, there are two different pots of the state money in terms of how we're budgeting the facilities master plan projects. The first is the state dollars that the district has already received or knows that they will be receiving. Those dollars we can count on for sure. The other dollars are eligibility for projects that the district has and may have submitted to the state, but those projects could be lower on the list than where the current state bond funds and may require a future state bond to be put on the ballot by the legislature. So those dollars we are not counting right now, but give you, as Thomas said, a source of funding to fund the shortfall projects that don't make it into the funding pot that the district currently has.
All right, so far we don't have any new questions.
And everyone, please feel free to raise your hand as well, if you would like to during this period.
We've got some raised hands now. Kristen, if you unmute yourself.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I had some questions about the elementary school. So obviously we have overruns at Murray, questions at Dublin L, and I know you didn't mention Doherty, but that was part of some of the wording on the Measure J bond. Are you looking at what facilities you would expect each of our elementary schools to have and help to guide, you know, what they should have as a minimum? And I'm thinking about shared spaces like libraries. For the size of our schools, is there a certain size library you would expect at each elementary, a certain size NPR, certain spaces for specialty? I mean, classrooms are fairly standard, but I'm just wondering if that's any part of it that would help and guide and understand the right way to use the money, specifically as we think about the different elementary schools.
I would say definitely that's something that we're looking at. Ed specs are a part of the master plan, and those ed specs give you a guide to develop equity across the district and all the different facilities. I would say that all the architects that are working on the current projects are very experienced within the state school facility program and state standards. So the California Department of Ed has a number of square footage standards that we have to meet in terms of classroom size. They used to have standards for, say, libraries and NPRs that most architects all still use as a guide when we're developing those facilities to make sure that there's equity and that appropriate spaces are on a campus, both classrooms and core facilities for the enrollment. One of the things in our last meeting with the board, in our board one-on-ones, we heard very clearly that the board is looking for big picture ideas to help solve the problem in its totality across the district so that we aren't necessarily making project decisions all the time on a project by project, one at a time basis.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we have another question here from David. Go ahead, David, if you unmute yourself. There you go.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I want to follow up on Jim's last point there. As a community member, I've been looking for quite some time, and even in discussions with board members and former board members, more of like a dashboard view across projects of like how we're doing with our facilities projects, just like in terms of timeline adherence, budget adherence, and funding sources, all in one place. It's very difficult as a community member to scroll through and seek through videos of board meetings and go look at slides to try to kind of piece that together on our own. And it would be super helpful, I think, for the community as a whole to have like a single place we can go and see how are all of our facilities projects doing. And even maybe that would be a great thing that you take 5 minutes every board meeting to just put up on the screen and look at the deltas between, from meeting to meeting. I think that would be super helpful. So I hope you consider it.
Yes, thank you. And actually the three things that you mentioned in terms of looking schedule, funding, and project scope or budget, those are the three things that we're working on as part of the master plan. So it is more of an implementation plan for the district's current projects. So we'll be developing a very simple spreadsheet that shows all those type of things. And that's something that could easily be used by the district in the future to report on how the district is doing.
All right, we have another question from Ramya. You can go ahead. Oh, there you go. Go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, I wanted to check if you've had a discussion about a possible fourth source of funding. You mentioned 3, and we will have in a couple of years when the new high school opens, we will have excess capacity at Dublin High. So, some of us were thinking maybe the district office location on Larkdale Avenue can be sold, and those offices can be moved to DHS because there are going to be a lot of vacant classrooms. So that could possibly be a fourth source of funding coming in. So I wonder if the committee is thinking about that, or you've already had a discussion with some of the board members.
That is definitely one of the big picture ideas that we're looking at is uses for the excess capacity at Dublin High School. So that will be one of the big picture ideas that we'll be reviewing different options with the board for use of that space. And that includes relocating other programs to free up surplus properties potentially.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Let's see.
Any other hands raised?
No other hands raised or no other questions at this time. Oh, here we go. We got a new question. Will there be a section in the plans that specifically covers special education classes needed and included? Specifically covering special education classes that are needed and included?
Yes, and one of the other things that we've heard some needs for is not just the classes, but it's the specialists and the itinerant programs such as speech, psychologists, counseling, and those other spaces, and the need for those in terms of permanent homes as well. So we'll be looking at program options for those facilities.
Okay, no hands raised, no more questions at this time.
So I did want to mention, after this meeting, we will be sending out an email with an email address where you can send over any additional questions that may have come up after we end the meeting. We want to make sure we give everyone the opportunity to maybe think about things a little bit and give that feedback if you can't think of any questions right now.
Okay.
I think we should go to the next steps.
Yep.
Oh, one more question.
Oh.
Go ahead, Walter.
There you go. Jumped in here. The excess capacity mentioned at Dublin High, how much space is actually portables?
The analysis that we're going to be doing for the capacity at Dublin High is just based on permanent buildings. I would imagine that as the phases of construction at Emerald are complete, that portables would be removed from the Dublin High School campus because they are for interim housing. There are some portables that the district owns that could be relocated for use at other campuses, but it's anticipated that they won't be needed there at the Dublin High School anymore to house the student enrollment, that there'll be plenty of space within the existing buildings, as well as potentially some surplus space.
One more question. Will the slides from the presentations be sent out?
Frida,
Yeah.
yeah, if we want to send this out, or does it want to be posted to the district's website? I'm sorry, you're muted there.
You're muted, Frida.
Yeah.
Oh, you're muted.
Still muted.
You're still muted.
How about now?
There
Yes.
you go.
We're gonna be posting this presentation on the district website, everyone.
Great, thank you. All right, looks like no more questions.
All right, going on to the next steps. Jim, I'll give
Great.
this over to you.
So the next steps is as I said, we're coming to the end of our information gathering, and now we're going to be starting to synthesize that into some big picture options for the board's consideration. So our meeting on July 15th will be our next meeting. We'll be presenting you more of the data that the questions were on today in terms of capacities and some of those other numbers. We'll also probably be outlining at that time some of the big picture ideas that we're going to be considering for resolution of the budget overages. And then meeting number 3 will actually be the draft plan in August 18th. That date could be flexible or move around a little bit depending on how our different board workshops go. But as we get the draft plan together, we'll be scheduling a 3rd town hall meeting for community input and comment. And I open it up one more time to see if there are additional questions. If there are not, I would just like to thank everybody for being here today. And community input and comment is extremely valued during this process. And one of the things that the district and the board wanted to make sure that we were doing wholeheartedly. Definitely let others know about these town hall meetings, and that there'll be another one in July and another one in the fall of this year. Thomas, do you want to say anything here at the closing?
Just want to thank everyone for attending, and thank everyone for an involvement. The Dublin Unified School District would not be near as successful as it is without all the hard work from parents and from the community, and I thank you very much.
All right, well, no questions, Walter?
No new questions.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And we look forward to seeing you in the next meeting in July. And we may see some of you at the various school sites throughout the process. So thank you very much for your input today and hope you have an enjoyable evening. All right. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.